What's up, my nerds? This is Crystal from Misfit Interactive, and I wanted to touch on a brief issue that I've noticed on a lot of websites lately, and a lot of my clients request this, and I do try to talk them out of it, but I'm not always successful. I would say I'm not a very good salesman. I'm really not, but I'm very passionate about what I do, and I feel like my personality is a little fun when I'm not trying to record a video and I'm being all nervous. So a lot of my clients kind of trust me in regards to this kind of stuff, but there are some that are very adamant about they want, certain things on their website. So the main thing I want to touch on is when on your website you have what's called a Facebook timeline and also an Instagram feed. Now, I have an Instagram feed on Misfit's website, but it doesn't really slow down my site as much because I don't have a lot of funky things going on. But a lot of websites that integrate these things, it really bogs down the speed of their site because what's happening is the code that is utilized to allow these feeds to show on your website, it has to pull from a third-party service. What that means is essentially you have to load scripts and files and connect to a third party or basically another system or another website such as Instagram or Facebook. And then it has to load that on your website. So it takes time not only to load your website, but then it has to go through the process of pulling all of these files and these integrations from these other websites in order to show up on your website before the website's considered fully loaded. So I'm going to show you. This is a client of mine. We launched this website, well, it was technically a while ago, and it was a different site. This is a clone copy of that website that they're also using for a conference. So this isn't a site that we've designed. We designed the framework for it, and then they've integrated it to use on this secondary site. But as you can see, they have Facebook timeline integration and an Instagram feed. And I love the Instagram feeds because, people are very visual. Social media is, I think I want to say, we have the attention span on social media of about 6 seconds, which is funny because a goldfish has an attention span of 8 seconds. So literally, people that are on social media have a less attention span than a goldfish. I mean, it makes sense because we're very, very visually oriented. We want to get through things quick and move on to the next thing. So I understand the desire for Instagram. I use it a lot. I integrate it into my business, several of my businesses, and then, of course, my personal account because it's very visual. And, of course, there's less politics, so it makes it a little bit more desirable. But what I want to touch on is if we're loading a website, one of the things that Google looks at is the page speed performance of a website. If your page is very slow, Google's not going to rank it as good as a website that loads a lot faster. One of these tools that you can use, GTmetrix, allows you to kind of get an idea of whether your site's fast or slow, how long it takes to load, 7.2 seconds for this particular example. It says the average is 6.9 seconds. Really, you want to get down to about 3 seconds, again, in order for it to load and rank with a lot of other websites. You also want the size of your website to be small, which means you don't want people having to download a lot of big files like videos and things like that. Here it says the average total page size is about 3 megabytes. This one's 2.4, so we're pretty good there. But our page speed score is 70%, which is a C. It was actually down to 44% before I started on all of this, but I have already done a lot of changes to the site to get it to load faster. But what I want to touch on right now is just the social media feeds. So right now, as is, this site loads at 70%. And some of the main issues, because it gives you scoring of different issues you can fix, they get an F in serve scaled images. And this basically means if you have let's say you have an image that's 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels. Well, if you need to fit that on a website, you need to reduce the size down. Now you can create another version of that file that is, say you need it in a 300 by 300 pixel space. So you just create another version that's 300 by 300 pixels. It's loading that full size of that image, but it's not taking the huge size and just reshaping it down with code. It's actually serving the actual size that you need in that space. What we see here is that it's loading all of these Instagram images, but it's loading, let's see if we can, it's loading, like, for example, most Instagram images are about 320 by 320. That's a 320 pixel square image, and it's reducing them down to 138 by 138. The image isn't 138 by 138. The image is 320 by 320, but with code, it's forcing it to look like 138 by 138. This counts against the page speed. And you can see we have like a bunch of versions of this because they load 10 images from their Instagram feed. Another thing I wanted to look at was optimizing images. Now, I've optimized some of their images with a plugin, but you can see Instagram, I can't do anything about the images that are loaded from Instagram because they're hosted on Instagram server, and I can't touch that. So this, again, because we're pulling this social feed, it counts against the page speed of this website. Now, we can look at a couple other things, like the defer parsing of JavaScript. You can see here, we're pulling a script from Facebook. Now, this isn't a huge deal. This might take a small amount of your time to load. It's not as bad. There's a couple other scripts that we can probably look at that are also considered against the page speed, such as minifying the JavaScript, which is basically taking all of your JavaScript files, and instead of loading a bunch of JavaScript files, we minify them all into one big file. So it's only loading one file rather than these multiple files. That's something I'll address later. But right now you can see it's still counting against it a little bit because this is still another script that we have to pull from another website. And there's a couple of them. You can see all these here. Oh, here's a bunch more. So again, all of these things count against a website that is trying to rank for speed. Now, what I'm going to do is in another window, I have disabled Instagram and Facebook on the same page, and I'm going to retest it. Now, it takes a little bit for it to go through and analyze everything, so this is going to take a second, but what will happen is this will now disappear, and then this will disappear, and instead, what we'll have is the new score of the website without having to load all these third-party scripts. Now, I may have to run it twice because it may require that I have to purge the cache. And really all a cache is when you load a website, when people reload the website over and over again, they're having to re-download scripts unless you have a way to cache it, which is creating a version of that website that if nothing's changed on the website, it just serves those same files again for somebody. So they're not reloading scripts over and over again because they've already got those files on their computer or in their browser or whatever. So it does look like I'm going to have to clear my cache because it's still pulling the Instagram and stuff. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to refresh it. Now, another thing we're going to notice when I'm refreshing this page is it's going to take a while to reload. Another huge factor in your search engine optimization or your page speed is going to be your server. If you just bought a hosting package through GoDaddy or HostMonster or something like that, if you haven't purchased a dedicated server, you're basically sharing a server with about 1,000 other websites. So they're all using the resources of that server or those computer bits that are hosting your website. What you want in order to get the most value or the most speed is a dedicated server. Now, they're way more expensive. We're talking $200 a month as opposed to maybe $5 a month. So I don't recommend this for small businesses. We do hosting at Misfit. We have maybe 30 clients on our server. So we keep it kind of restricted because I don't want to, one, I don't really plan to get into the hosting business. But two, I like being able to provide a little bit of page speed and server capabilities for my clients. So Instagram's gone. The Facebook's gone. We've purged our cache. I'm going to run this again. So another thing that I think is going on with this particular site is I don't know, either one, it's not on a dedicated server, or two, it's on a dedicated server, but it's sharing resources with another website that's fairly intense with its loading of files. So it could be another site that's getting a lot of traffic, loading a lot of files or whatever. Again, that's something else I'll look at later when we're doing optimization for this site. So as it's loading, well, there's a couple things that do look like they are working. 4.2 seconds loading time is better than the 7 we were looking at earlier. It still doesn't seem to be acknowledging the Instagram deletion, so I'm going to check my code real quick. And I did disable it in their theme. So what I'm going to do is another cache clear. And sometimes you have to do multiple. I mean, it could be many factors that are preventing this from seeing it. But the goal is to make sure that it's reading the version of the website that doesn't have the Instagram integrated. So we are going to go in and retest again. But the goal of this video really is to show you that, I mean, if you want to have Facebook and Instagram be a part of your marketing strategy, that's great. I highly recommend it. Instagram is growing huge right now because, one, it's bought out by Facebook, so you can use Facebook's advertising platform to advertise on Instagram. But two, it's very visual, and Facebook's so full of politics right now that I don't even like being on it as much as I have to be, just because, it can be a very toxic environment. So Instagram provides a more visually pleasing environment these days, and it's growing pretty big. Okay, here we go. So finally, no more Instagram, no more image issues. We're doing pretty good. Now the site load time is still up. That's something that, again, I'll have to address with either JavaScript issues. I really think it's a server load issue. We've reduced the megabyte size of the page. We went from 70% to 83. I mean, obviously you want a page speed score of like 100%, like an A. But if you do any kind of advanced features on your website at all, like a rotating banner, something that requires JavaScript instead of just a static page, you're going to probably not be an A. B is good. C is okay. D and F obviously are bad. I mean, it's like your school grades, but essentially we've done a lot of improvements just by removing the social media. And that's all we've removed. We've increased this page speed by 13% as far as page speed score goes. Now, there is a YSlow set of things that I have to do yet for this site. Creating a content delivery network they don't currently have. There's still a lot of JavaScript that's being loaded on the site. So these are things that I'll work on, but the main point of this video is just to show that I know that you guys like having your timeline showing on your website, and maybe having one Instagram image show would be okay, but if you've got multiple Instagram images and you're displaying them like smaller than they actually are, like on Misfit's site, I'll show you real quick. I have Instagram integrated, but the way I've integrated it is basically showing the normal size of the Instagram image. Actually, it's on the side page now that I'm thinking about it. So let's go. So this is a normal Instagram size. This is the 360 by 360 or whatever. I'm not shrinking it down to be smaller. So here it doesn't really count against me. And this is what I would suggest. If you're going to include Instagram, do it this way. You're still pulling in a third-party script, but at least you're not, loading multiple images. You're not forcing the size of the images through code rather than it being the actual size of the image. I mean, there's a couple different factors, but in general, my argument is against adding Facebook timelines and a reduced size Instagram widget if you can help it. Another thing I would touch on as if you're using a WordPress site, I mean, it's great to have plugins that do all kinds of neat functionality that you like on your website, but the more plugins that you have, the slower your site's going to load. Because a lot of those plugins require some sort of JavaScript that has to be loaded. What I would suggest instead is if you can condense everything down into fewer plugins, or if you can just simply live without certain functionality and still get your point across for your website, that's what I would do. But again, right now I'm just focusing on not integrating these timelines and these third-party scripts on your site if you can help it, because it really does slow down your site. The goal is to have it load fast. People have a short attention span. Google pretty much has a short attention span before it starts decreasing your ranks on its search engine results. But again, it's whatever the client wants for the most part. But my suggestion is just to try to avoid these and instead just link to your social media through icons. If people want to read it, they'll go to your Facebook and they'll like it. If you're doing really well with your social marketing, they're going to enjoy what you're reading and they're going to follow you anyway. Again, this is Crystal with Misfit Interactive. Thanks.